Tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, we are gonna talk about the season because it's over. That kind of stinks. But first, our guys with Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, I won't lie, like it felt weirdly real, like as I pressed the button to go live, of like, this is the first show we're not talking about a game. Like it genuinely sank in, like in that second.
Yeah. I've been feeling it all week just because if you've listened to the show long enough, you've heard me talk about how like I need habits and like everything has to function. And this is a tough time of year for me of coming out of the season because like my week is so built around getting ready for the show. Right. And then it feels like for me, it feels like Thursday is like a little bit of relief. Like, okay, the show's over. I've done my research. Now I can just sit back and enjoy memes and jokes about the Bills, right? Like all the research is over. And now really for this week only, this is one thing, Greg, that I don't think the average listener knows is this week only isn't too bad. It felt like a week off. We really felt like we probably had almost like a week and a half off from the show, right? Because we didn't do it last week and then getting ready for this week. There wasn't much to get ready for, right? It's all reminiscing about the season. This one's an easy one. The toughest part about this gig is we get the most attention, the most views, the most likes, all that stuff during the season. And really, even though we put a lot of work into it, those are the easy shows, right? Like it's in season. I want to look forward to that stuff.
Yeah.
Now's where we have to like really actually start really grinding and work hard for less views. And so like it is off season, but it's a little bit worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, it's, not that, watching the, condensed versions of the games of the upcoming opponents or like reading through the different advanced stats or metrics or things, like there's work, but it seems it's more fun because it's preparing for a game and it's like trying to figure out and there's a challenge to it. It's like a puzzle. It's trivia. Okay, so what do I think we should do and what are the things we should do to it? And now, like you said, it's kind of like, oh, all right, yeah, I guess it's
and half this work we do this time of year that won't matter. Where all the game work you do matters.
Yes, I know if I prep to talk about this opponent, we're going to play that game. Yeah. I'm going to prepare for so many free agents and draft guys that we're not going to sign and we're not going to draft, and it's just going to hurt my soul. And I'm just going to get angry and be like, oh, yeah. And already I feel myself watching these clips of the Senior Bowl. So anybody who hasn't checked it out, Eric, Anthony, our new guys, John Helmkamp, and Daniel Harms are down there. We got a whole squad down there for Cover One, covering the Senior Bowl. They're putting out video clips. They're interviewing players. They're doing daily reaction videos. Make sure you guys are checking that out. I was at a day job work trip during this week, so I wasn't able to go this year. But it's, incredible stuff. And I can already feel myself falling for a couple guys. And I'm watching these, of course, my favorite, like wide receiver, cornerback one-on-ones or versus air where it's set up to look good. And for guys, but you saw like some insane catches that Xavier Legette had an awesome catch. Ricky Pearsall had an awesome catch. Ladd McConkey had an awesome catch. There's a couple of different ones that look really, really nice. And I can already feel myself falling for them.
Oh yeah, no, and I'll get knee deep into it. It's it's such an interesting dynamic of what we do, right? Like during the season, it just flows and it's easy, and then this off season, I think people think it is, because it's not as much interest, but we end up working more, and that's just like always been a weird dynamic of making content for this time of year. Yeah. But this one's an easy one to look back on.
So real quick, before tonight, we are going to go through our season awards, our season recap, but there were a couple newsy elements that happens this week. So Aaron, on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you with the offensive coordinator hire?
Yeah, right. A 1, right. And it's nothing again. Like this is a tough one for me to talk with people about because you knew there wasn't going to be this process, right? We know Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott love to have these plans in place and develop staff and bring in their own. It's the same thing with re-signing their own players. Like they pride themselves on having that type of growth within their own organization. But then we also wanted to demand like a real authentic search, and it wasn't going to line up with their general philosophy overall.
It's
and we
also
saw
hard to get people who are like the top end candidates when their agent is reaching out being like, hey, aren't you guys already just going to hire Joe Brady? Like, are you really interested in so I'll bring up a name. If not for Joe Brady, I would have been genuinely advocating for Eric Bieniemy. I am interested in I want to find my Steve Spagnuolo. I want to find the OC that weirdly does well but doesn't get head coach interviews and has sustainability, and you can actually pair with a defensive minded head coach, because that's my biggest fear. Like, and any of the points I made about Sean McDermott were always not because he deserved to be fired or not because we wanted to get rid of him, but because like, hey, if we're going to go through this different thing and we're not going to achieve what we want, well, then we might as well try to have some sustainability offensively, so we're not recycling this. And we just saw I think this year's coaching cycle was a good refresher that one, more than half the openings are defensive coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Two, who was the best new hire last year?
Yeah.
D'Amico Ryans.
Right. I don't want to say, but I felt like it was a win for the philosophy that I've been saying of where the NFL is and what talent actually gets taken and what talent still remains available. Right. Like, I think
Bobby Slowick stayed. Bobby Johnson stayed. A lot of guys either didn't get the offer they wanted or, it sounded like Washington backed up the Brinks truck. I'm not sure. Ben Johnson had his chance of a number 2 overall pick with a top end quarterback,
brand new owner,
probably like a 5-year, $75 million deal, and said, no, I'm going to hold on.
And that is interesting to me because that's one I'm going to follow to see, is that going to be a trend with some of these guys of like, say, a Joe Brady, where he's in a situation where you have a Josh Allen, you have an offense that is competitive for a Super Bowl. Do you want to go and take that head coaching job just because it's the one that's available, because there's only 2 or 3 available you have to choose from? Or do you want to sit back and know that you're going to be sought after year and still have a chance to win a Super Bowl and make a lot of money in Buffalo and still have that fame? Like, I'm interested, is this a trend or is Ben Johnson just an anomaly type of a guy?
And in an honest moment, if Harbaugh didn't get that Chargers job and either Slowick or Ben Johnson got offered the Justin Herbert coaching position, all of a sudden, are they more interested in making that move? But in full sincerity, I don't blame them. Like, if I think both.
You might only get one chance, right? We see coaches that go on to be a head coach, fail, and then that knocks them. They get that knock.
Correct. Or, and it's rarer, but we've seen a couple guys not capitalize when their moment was like, hey, they are the hot guy, and then they stay. You see this with small school basketball coaches. You see, Matt Canada is a great example. You see it sometimes where there's the hot name, and then like, well, they're going to wait till the perfect opportunity comes, and then all of a sudden they have a weird season and they don't quite have the same openings, and then they do take the weird lesser position, the Carolina job, like Dave Canales gets that job out there in Carolina.
Abel taking Giants.
Yes. Like when those things come up, all of a sudden you're like, we'll see how he does. Like, it's not real high. What we made, and I'll credit them, they played tough, but what we made fun of out in Arizona last year, like, that guy's not going to last. And I don't know if he did give him to play tough, but I still don't know that I have long-term.
It's probably not going to be great. Yeah.
In that guy. But anyways, I think Joe Brady's the easiest one. I don't think there's a ton to talk about. I will say I am curious of, he couldn't put all that much of his own stamp on things. Like when you get you're brought up in season, you pretty much have to just continue to maybe shuffle around the order of things. Eric talks a lot about the sequencing and the actual pacing of the play calls and when you call what plays, but he couldn't install new plays. Like, you can't do that mid-season.
No.
So I am a little interested. Do we see a slightly different flavor? I don't think we're going to see drastic changes of anything, but do we see slightly different flavor now that he gets a full off season to kind of put some things together? And who is his quarterback coach hire going to be? He and McDermott together. I'm guessing that he will have some say in who the quarterback coach is. Is that a promotion internally? I know you had brought that up as a possibility. We've seen Mark Lubick and
Kyle
Shermer as the assistants in that area. Do one of them get promoted into a full-time quarterback coach? Obviously, we've seen names thrown out there like bringing back Davis Webb or a recently fired offensive coordinator. Do you see the reverse Peter principle, where a guy who probably got promoted too high but might be a good quarterback coach? Do you see one of those guys come back and work with him? What are you excited to see, and is there anything you might see different?
Yeah, so this has been an interesting conversation, right? Because the Bills and data are super confusing in 2023, 2024 here. And the analytics say that the offense didn't get better under Joe Brady. Even
turnovers went down, balance went up. Those are the two things that improved.
Yeah, and I would say, so my argument with people is, I think it was more of a wash, right? But we all knew Dorsey analytically had a good offense. What it was situational and execution in the manner which he, to Eric's point, used his offense, right? And I thought that Joe Brady took the tools that Dorsey had and used them in a better manner. And he pulled, Joe Marino always likes to talk about pulling the right levers. He pulled the right levers at the right times so that when you got on those fringes of the red zone, it wasn't plays that was relying on Josh Allen and forcing him into situations where he was turning the ball over in those situations. It was being smart and getting Josh to take what the defense was giving him. So,
well, in your former life, different chefs can put together different meals with the same ingredients. Like, somebody can make a better meal with the same ingredients. It doesn't have to be. And that was, there were some pieces of it where it was better, but there were some pieces where, some of the metrics said we got worse in some of those areas, some of the efficiency ones.
Yeah, for sure. But what I'm excited, to your point, is, okay, now how is it different with him having a full off season to install? Is it still going to be these option routes that seem really confusing and putting too much on the wide receiver? We had some big moments fail because of those option routes and Josh and a receiver just not being on the same page. Do the Bills get the 1 seed if those are more concise and we're not running that type of stuff? I don't know. Are they going to lean into that more? Is it going to be the standard, like the Dayball EP offense that really still, even in that Dorsey playbook, was based in the Dayball playbook? Or is he going to drift into some more of the stuff that he wants to see? And if that's the case, I'm real excited. I'm buying fantasy stock of James Cook, right? I'm getting into the slot receiver roles here. And so those are the exciting things that I think we won't find out until this summer, what the differences are going to look like. But I'm excited in that last KC game, there was a lot of talk about throwing behind the line of scrimmage and the way they were attacking. But I thought it was a brilliant, when you're going up against a guy like Spagnuolo, like
with Snead and McDuffie, and they had us outmanned, from a DV standpoint.
And we created space for playmakers to move the ball efficiently. And do you want to find those explosives? Yes. They just didn't hit on them. That was an execution issue. But they took the explosives when they were there. They tried to connect on them, but then they took what the defense gave them. Were able to move the ball up and down against one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. That gave me a lot of hope for he can do that with Dorsey's playbook. I want to see how he's attacking the best defenses with his own.
The other move that we saw just happened today, I believe it was today. We saw the promotion of Bobby Babich to defensive coordinator. This one obviously seemed, I don't think anyone was sure that we were going to hire a defensive coordinator. McDermott was non-committal in his presser, but seemed open to it. Then we saw Bobby Babich interview for defensive coordinator positions. Then we saw the Bills interview people for defensive coordinator positions. Once those two events happened, it wasn't super hard.
And Eric Washington.
And very good point. We had brought up a lot that although I had been advocating for Bobby Babich, we had both spoken very highly of his potential. We both also pointed out that, hey, when the team was obligated to put someone out there for a press conference, when the defensive coordinator normally would, they put Eric Washington out there, or they put John Butler out there. Those are the two guys who would do press conferences. So, there's kind of a, do you have to wait your turn? Are they the next one in line? Are they going to leapfrog a younger guy over a tenured guy who was already the assistant head coach?
Right.
So I don't know what tea leaves you want to read or what dots you want to connect. I'm going to interpret that this was Babich is ambitious and wants to be promoted, had opportunities outside the building.
Yeah.
That they told Eric Washington, hey, we think we're going to go this direction. And he then looked elsewhere for other opportunities and found some people tried to argue it's a lateral position. I believe any defensive line / assistant head coach, you get paid more as a defensive coordinator. That's a pay raise. And it's still probably similar because he's going to be the defense coordinator under Matt Eberflus, who calls the defense. So it's
I don't know.
Similar in responsibility, but it is still a promotion. He's going to be paid more money, and the title is higher.
The title's higher, the promote. Yeah. And the work is going to be more. He is going to get the defense ready during the week. Just because Eberflus is calling it, he's still a head coach. And that was one of the issues.
I think he did like half here because I think it was him and
Holcomb
was
part of that.
And I think it was run game coordinator, pass game coordinator kind of thing, the defensive version of that. And they prepped it. And then McDermott called the plays during the day. So he might have been doing like the front half of some of that work.
It's just weird to me, Greg, because we don't fight over these intricacies of this stuff when it comes to the offensive guys who are under offensive minded coaches who aren't calling plays, but those guys still end up going on and
has
getting
an
hired.
OC. Shanahan has an OC. Like those guys do those things all the time.
Yeah. So it's definitely
Matt LaFleur got a head coaching job without ever calling plays.
Correct. Yeah. So it's weird that we're nitpicking it. It seems like there's certain groups of people that are trying to continue on a narrative of like, oh, the Bills the coaches don't want to be around Sean McDermott. They all want to go laterally.
Yeah. Two young up and coming coordinators interviewed for other coordinator jobs and came back here and took the job with the Bills. So it must not be all that bad.
Yeah.
So
and who knows? Maybe there weren't offers, but I'm gonna applaud Sean McDermott for. I don't think he gets enough credit. There's plenty of flaws that we can go over with Sean McDermott, but I think overall, at least since that first staff he hired was a little bit weird because he ended up with probably his fourth choice for offensive coordinator and Rick Dennison. And then Rick Dennison brought in his own people. So he had to fire a bunch of people. And so that boosted those numbers a little bit. But since then, I think he's done a great job in terms of building a staff and getting staff in underneath really good coordinators where they haven't had, like, one of our big worries was disruption to Josh and his progress. And they've really been able to kind of bridge that gap with good talent. And when they did fail, they still had good talent in the system so you can move on from Dorsey and have Joe Brady, right? So like, that's all kudos to Sean McDermott for building that staff, not only for the seasons, but with the idea of promoting from within. And now we're looking at who could be quarterback coach, and there's options, right? Like there's guys that we feel confident that can do it on staff. And same here in this situation, like, okay, now Babich is coming up. You can slide Holcomb right into linebacker coach. This is a guy that's like, this is a perfect situation where you don't have to go freak out and go hire people. You have everybody in the building.
Yeah. So one last piece on this. I'm torn. I don't think it's a slam dunk. My initial thought was, McDermott will continue to call the plays, and this will be like a nice developmental year for Babich, and then maybe in the future he hands that off. But there's a piece of me that wonders, are there some of the game day management things that McDermott wants to have more control back over? Or did he love this? Like, it seemed like it was a spark for him. It did seem like it relit a fire for him. What is your gut say? Do you think he keeps the game day play calling on defense, or do you think he hands that off to Babich with the coordinating title?
I won't be shocked if that was part of the deal with Babich. If there was a deal in place, like people have talked about, I don't know that there's any truth to it that Sean McDermott's a control freak, right? And that he wants this control. If that is the case and coaches don't want that, and there was a job available for Babich, I would think that he would make a point to say like, okay, if I'm staying,
I also want to be able to call plays.
I want to call these plays, right? And honestly, though, at the same time, people have that view of Sean McDermott, but everything he said when it comes to how he views coordinators, I think that he wants him to be able to call plays and put his fingerprint on it and trust in him. And having been a coordinator in the past, I think that that is how coaches treated him as a coordinator. And I think that he passes that along in terms of, you got to let this guy do it. And I do think in the same way where with even Leslie Frazier, who was a veteran coach and older than Sean McDermott, when it got out of control, he stepped in and helped out and took over the play calling duty, but it was never long-term, and he never really stepped on his toes too much. And those past couple of years with Leslie Frazier, he really made a point to say, no, this is Leslie Frazier's defense. And we saw the difference in a Sean McDermott defense from a Leslie Frazier defense this year. So it really was Leslie's defense. So I do think he will give him that ability to have a fingerprint on it. I think he believes in development, and that's part of it. And so I'm going to take him at his word, and I expect Babich to be calling his own plays.
Yeah. I feel very strongly Babich will call plays long-term, and I'm 50-50 on whether it starts this season.
Maybe not. Well, and so this is my concern. So, right, like, I think, again, we panicked hearing Babich was going to be going. We love him. We love what he's done with the linebacker position. He is
saw all the defensive players go crazy when he got promoted.
I think he's going to be a great coach. His dad, I think there's a case for Bob Babich to go into the Hall of Fame as a positional coach. Like what he did
joke,
at linebacker.
He's like a Dante Scarnecchia level position coach, just at linebacker instead of at offensive line.
But was never not a good coordinator. And that wasn't his thing. He leaned back into just being a linebacker coach. Not all positional coaches make good coordinators. I don't know about Babich. This is the same thing that the discussion we had with Dorsey. Like, yeah, he's a cool quarterback coach. I don't mind him. Can he call plays in a game?
Yeah.
And so to your point, this is an unknown, right? We know with Joe Brady, he has experience calling plays. We can feel confident there. Right now, Babich, as much as we like him as a coach, we don't know what his philosophy is on how he would call defenses, how he would scheme up blitzes, disguise coverages.
Yeah. I do like how they've rounded his skill set from a coaching standpoint. He's been an assistant secondary. He's been safety coach. He's been a linebacker coach. I like that it's not pigeonholed just in one area. That although he's young, I think he just turned 40
and handsome, very handsome man.
Yeah, young, handsome. Both him and Joe Brady. We have young, handsome coordinators. It's a good set.
Look at us.
I do like that he has a well-rounded skill set. So, like I said, I feel confident long-term he is, and I think there's a good chance that it starts this year. I won't be shocked if McDermott holds it the first year.
That's gonna rub all those control freaks.
Oh my god. Well, and I am a huge Sean McDermott defender. I'm also pretty comfortable. He is a control freak. Like he is. Like now, people
you don't get to this spot without.
People conflate that in only being a bad thing. He is a try hard. He is over the top. He is, super, yes, I do think he probably was a hall monitor in elementary school. Like, a lot of those, I kind of think that. I don't think he's probably always the most awesome person to work for. I also think he's a good football coach. Like, I don't have to love every single personality trait about a guy to say he's a really good football coach.
Yeah. An organizational leader.
I believe we've learned on the media rights end of things. He controls an awful lot of things and is very, very controlling of who gets access to what. It does. The Astro makes a great point here. He's a micromanager. Nick Saban and Bill Belichick were too. Like they are ultimate micromanagers and have their fingers in everything. It's not a bad thing. It's just, I think some people try to conflate that as just only a negative and that's a bad thing. Like, no, he wants to have control of his program because he's building the program and building the culture. So
yes, a lot of these people you would think haven't worked with people before.
Yeah. How many people have worked for a good leader, but that was involved in everything and was very and it is
an annoyingly so.
Yes, yeah, and that can be annoying, but they also sometimes can bring out the best in you. They also can drive really good results. Like some of them grind people and aren't a long-term fit for it, but they can also be good.
You don't go drinking with them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you're not going. And I don't know how many people go out for a beer with Sean McDermott. Like I genuinely don't. Like I
only
don't know
the ones he makes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know for sure how often that happens. It is what it is.
Whatever.
All right. So Joe Brady, Bobby Babich, we're in good shape. A couple hires now. That means we need a new linebacker coach. That means we need a new quarterback coach. You touched on we have internal options. I do think they'll poke around externally. But like you said, I think we have that succession plan in place. They're very good at building that. Maybe we see if someone gets brought in, maybe there's a new Al Holcomb that is a senior defensive assistant with a vague term. Maybe there is a new senior offensive assistant with a vague term, and they set up their next backup plan, succession plan. Those things can happen. We'll see where it goes. All right. Without further ado, tonight's topic is a season recap. We are going to go through some of our season awards, looking at the overall elements. Obviously, this Buffalo Bills season was a huge roller coaster. It finished 11-6. They were 6-6 at one point, so finished on a 5-game win streak. They won the division for the 4th year in a row. They won a playoff game for the 4th year in a row. Them and the Chiefs are the only teams that have done that for the 3rd year in a row. For the 3rd year in a row, it ended in the division round in frustrating fashion. With a close last-minute loss to the Chiefs, obviously a painful missed field goal and missed opportunities. Khalil Shakir opened in the end zone, and Chris Jones, bumps into Josh Allen. And we're here to now talk through how do we now make sense of that season, and who do we award some of the NFL awards out to, and maybe a couple made-up ones that we came up with as well. It's funny, I literally made one up just for an excuse to talk about Bobby Babich, and now he got promoted. So
there you go.
It's easier.
And real quick, while we're doing a sort of overview, I know I love to do DVOA and just update people on that. Where Bills finished in DVOA this year with all those ups and downs and with the crazy season, they finished 3rd total. It was Baltimore was 1st, San Francisco 2nd, Buffalo was 3rd overall. They finished 3rd in offense, 12th in defense, which is one of the lower DVOAs, but hats off to Sean McDermott for getting to 12th with the unit that he ended up having throughout most of the season. And then special teams ended up at 15th. Not great, right in the middle there, with a lot of high variance special teams, but pretty good. Ended up 3rd overall DVOA. So pretty good season from an analytic perspective anyway.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's, one, it reassures that, hey, the roller coaster probably wasn't as bad as it feels, but all the more frustrating that it ended in the way it did and didn't get back to that Final Four or to ultimately to the Super Bowl where they need to get to.
Yep.
So we'll start with the quickest and easiest award, and then kind of the pseudo made up award that goes along with it. The MVP, it's not even that fun to talk about with the Bills, because it's not cliche. The only possible answer is Josh Allen,
because he should be the MVP of the whole league.
He should be the MVP of the NFL. He was. You cannot convince me that any team benefited more from one player or would have been more negatively impacted by losing that one player than Josh Allen to the Buffalo Bills.
100%.
What the swing in win total, the swing in ceiling capabilities, the difference he made, you want to talk about in Vegas, the point spread differential swing of what losing what he is the single most impactful player to that in the NFL. And to me, that is how I equate value and why I believe he is the most valuable player. So although begrudgingly, he still does not have an MVP award. He didn't even make the Pro Bowl this year, which is such a joke.
I mean, good for him though.
Very clear. Yeah,
he's golfing at Pebble Beach right now.
Golfing at Pebble Beach instead of playing dumb games at the Pro Bowl. He is the MVP. I know you had a good suggestion. And we do have Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, so this is maybe a good chance to sneak in someone different or someone else. Who is your non-Josh Allen MVP?
Yeah, so my non-Josh Allen MVP, it was up for debate internally, and so I'm going to just talk it out real quick here. For me, it was between Mitch Morse and Deion Dawkins, and I'm going to go, I am going to go with Mitch Morse.
Okay, good, because I'm going to go with Deion, and I wore the shirt.
I thought
the shirt because of it.
And this is why I'm going with Mitch, and I want to make a case for Mitch in that the season did get rough. And at least as a fan, when I tuned in to hear what was going on in the media, Mitch Morse was the calming, reassuring, leadership voice in this building. And I think that he was in the locker room too. And I think that he leads a lot of this, just staying forward and staying focused. He's just the guy. He's a gel kind of guy for this team. And the offensive line performed really well. And he's sort of the captain of that unit. Yeah. And so for me, it was Mitch Morse deserving. It feels like he's like a 50-year-old wise player, but he's not.
It's super important to remember Nate Geary's older than Mitch Morse. So for anybody who likes to remind Nate of that, he loves that fact. It's one of his favorite facts.
Yeah.
Nate Geary is older than Mitch Morse. The first time I figured that out and told Nate, I broke his brain.
Yeah.
Like, just because he does feel like an elder statesman. He joked that at Missouri, his nickname amongst the offensive linemen was Dad. Yeah. So I think he's one of those people who's always carried just himself
old soul. Yeah.
as an old soul and is a very mature leader in person. So I enjoyed very much when I first found that neat fact. It's by like a month or two. But I found that and it just tickled me to bring that to his attention. So great call. I those were very much where my mind was. I wore this shirt on purpose. You'll see the other half of it here in a little bit. But the Angry Runs Award shirt from the wonderful Kyle Brandt and Good Morning Football. This is a fun one.
That's a good one.
Homage did. So it's got Deion Dawkins and James Cook holding the scepters. Deion Dawkins had a renaissance season. He was fantastic. I don't go crazy with this stuff. He's not Trent Williams. He's not, peak Jonathan Ogden. I don't think he's like the most elite left tackle in the NFL. He's a damn good starting left tackle. And when you have Josh Allen, that's all you need. Like, would I like elite at every single spot? Of course. Sure. But a damn good starting left tackle when you have Josh Allen is perfectly good. Yeah. So
he's physically the best offensive lineman in a really good offensive line.
He's the best athlete and the best overall player amongst that group.
Yep.
And this year had probably his best season. Had his best season. All of his metrics across the board were very clean. Not perfect. He still let up some hurries. I think they credit him technically with 2 sacks, but
there's a lot of good defensive linemen in this league.
Yeah, correct. There's a lot of good guys, and we played a ton of them.
Yeah.
And Deion Dawkins is a part of the reason. Josh Allen is the biggest reason, but part of the reason that Josh Allen is the least sacked quarterback in the NFL is because Deion Dawkins had a great season and played really, really well. So he would be my non-Josh Allen MVP. I think Mitch Morse is very much deserving of that discussion as well. All right, moving on.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears to the defensive side of the ball before we talk more offense. Who do you have as your defensive player of the year?
I
had a 2-man race.
You did. It was for me, it was just a runaway for Ed Oliver.
Okay.
Even though he didn't show up in the final playoff game, and I know that recency bias is going to probably frustrate people. We talk about player having a renaissance. Like Ed Oliver matched and exceeded his contract that he got here this year and really became the dominant player that he was drafted to be. And the
72
in the middle
pressures, hurries, the combination of sacks, quarterback hits and hurries. 72, you're talking about some elite status.
Yeah, this is where we all projected that he would be the type of disruptor that he would be, and it's finally happened. It just took a year or two later, and part of that was injuries and stuff. So because of that kind of hiccup in development, the Bills ended up actually getting a pretty good deal when you look at that defensive line market, and he's going to be a guy that wrecks games. He's going to need some help here. There's going to be some reinforcements coming here to help him out, but he is very much the guy they drafted him to be, and for that reason, with the lack of playmakers this year and the type of guys with Milano out, Vaughn not fully recovered, he was the most consistent disruptor on the defense.
And that puts him in company. The only guys ahead of him were Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, and Justin Madubuike, who is semi a defensive end. He was ahead of Quinn Williams, ahead of Dexter Lawrence, ahead of Christian Wilkins, ahead of Zach Seiler, Zach Allen, Javon Hargrave, like some studs, DeForest Buckner, Leonard Williams. Those are the next guys in order. Ed Oliver was 4th in the NFL. That is exactly what we paid him to be. He was my choice as well. I will say I'll give a shout out. Terrell Bernard, I think, deserved to be in the running.
Definitely.
And would have been my runner-up and was my 2-man race here. I think those two stood above most of the rest. You can make a case maybe if Russell Douglas had been here all season, maybe he would have been there, like, because he made such an impact in his short period of time.
Taryn had a great season too.
Yes, of course. He's always underrated,
but he's always
in
there,
what he does.
right?
Yeah. Super dependable. Wasn't his statistically his best season, just because it didn't. It's hard. Like, the ball doesn't always go his way in those things.
Totally.
So he technically didn't have an interception this year and things like that, but still was fantastic. Finally got the All-Pro recognition that he did.
Yep.
All right, back to Offensive Player of the Year. I'll let you lead off this one.
All right, I went with James Cook as my Offensive Player of the Year here. I mean, 1,500 yards total from scrimmage, just really solidified being the number one running back in this offense. And as Brady came on, you saw them lean more into using him to attack defenses. And that's probably the most exciting thing for me here going forward. Is I know, like, everyone really wants to get another wide receiver and make sure that we got a guy to replace Diggs when he goes. But I look at these tight ends and Shakir in the slot and this shifty pass catching running back that can really do more work on the ground than I originally thought when they drafted him, becoming a real number one running back type of guy, and the way he ran. And he had some adversity in this season, but he kept grinding and got the ball, and he forced this team's hand to make him the number one running back. And I love that. And so he's my Offensive Player of the Year, because it seemed like every time he got the ball, it was good things were happening.
Yeah. If you had told me coming into the season that James Cook would be 4th in the NFL in rushing yards and 5th in the NFL in yards from scrimmage, I would have laughed. I thought, I was excited about the James Cook addition.
Yeah.
I was happy about him as a change of pace running back and a good receiving back, and that he would be a part of a good backfield, but you would always
scattered in.
Yeah. A Devin Singletary, a primary back. You would always need he's not a Jahmyr Gibbs kind of player, but you would always need the David Montgomery. You'd always need the other piece to it. If you had told me he had 237 carries, he had 237 carries and 44 receptions. The man had 281 touches. That's insane. 281. I mean, that is just an unbelievable amount.
Could you imagine
of touches.
If Sean McDermott didn't keep him in the doghouse those 2 drives?
Yeah. The number of guys who had that many total touches on the season, he was 10th in the NFL in total touches. Now, that's crazy. You talk about all the guys who had more touches than him. The Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley. So Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, Rashad White, all had more touches than him, and he had more yards than all those players.
Yeah.
So this wasn't volume based. He had more yards on fewer touches than Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, like elite players. That is something I did not anticipate. No. That level, that he had high efficiency last year. I think technically, if he had just a couple more carries, he technically would have led the NFL in yards per carry, but he didn't qualify. I think he was like 2 carries short or something like that. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's exciting. And if you had told me, no, he's going to maintain 5.6 yards per touch, but he's going to do it with 281 touches, you're crazy. There's no chance he can hold up at that much. Bijan Robinson had 5.4 yards per touch. Like, that's the kind of, other super efficient guys. Kyron Williams, 5.2. Those are the highest guys. Jahmyr Gibbs at 5.4. He had more than all those guys. The only player who averaged more yards per touch out of any of those kind of players is Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, that was it.
And he's an MVP candidate.
Yes,
should be.
Christian McCaffrey actually, in full sincerity, Christian McCaffrey is the guy who probably should get the MVP this year. When you look at like team success and total
leaning into
production and like what they did, like if you're not going to give it to Josh Allen, McCaffrey actually should have been the next guy. But either way, that's the only player who had more yards per touch, from just producing at that scale. The guys who were all 200 touches and above, that's the only guy who had more. Jalen Warren was 5.5. I'm scrolling down through the list, all the highest guys. Tyjae Spears, all the spark plug guys who were creating explosive plays. had half the touches he did, and he still had more yards per touch.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Like you just could not have convinced me that was possible.
So now I'm going to be mad though if he's not also your offensive player of the year. Is he? Okay.
He is.
All right.
So that was I think one of the easier ones.
Yeah.
And if anything, if I didn't already have that slated for the offensive player of the year, he probably would have been my non-Josh Allen MVP from that standpoint. But I knew I was going to give him some shine in that spot as well.
Yep.
All right. So I let you lead off for a couple.
Yeah.
How about I'll start here with most improved player. This one, I think there was a couple guys who deserve some recognition here. I don't know how you count. I think that you can maybe make a case that Terrell Bernard improved, but we don't really know what he was last year. A guy that I didn't pick, but I want to give some love. I was as critical of Terrell Dotson as anyone anywhere around this space. I want to credit Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich. They found a great way to use him in the spots he was good at, and then schemed in the 3 safety look with Jordan Poyer down at dime linebacker in the obvious passing situations. And that's perfect usage for him. God bless him. I hope that somebody like Atlanta or Arizona throws a bag at him and he gets a whole bunch of money. Good for him. Whoever. I hope somebody pays him as a every down starting linebacker, and God bless him. Go take advantage of that PFF grade and get yourself a big payday. And I owe him an apology. I did not think that was possible for him to contribute in the way that he did, but he was my runner up. I went with Spencer Brown. The number of snaps played, I thought I had a pretty clearly defined look at what he was. I did not think this level of improvement was possible because we had seen so much. Like it's one thing when it's Terrell Bernard and it's like, well, I don't really know what we have. And like, oh my gosh, we have something good. I saw snaps. I watched him play. I thought I knew what he was capable of. And for him to now take that step in the way that he did, it wasn't perfect. They still credit him with 5 sacks. He was not the highest efficiency player, but he turned into a good starting right tackle, an above average starting right tackle. And I did not think that was in the cards here. And from the level he was, where it was, I don't know if it was both of our number one, but right up there as our biggest concern coming into the season, that and linebacker. There's right tackle and linebacker. Talk about our 2 biggest surprises. I think he deserves that credit. So those are guys I considered. I had, I wanted to give Terrell Dotson some shine there because I thought he played great, but I had to pick Spencer Brown.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. My midseason, I wrote an apology on Twitter to him because I was super hard on Spencer Brown and really wanted to replace him and really mad at Brandon Beane for not doing more.
We did not have a veteran. Jermaine, I take that back. Jermaine Ifedi technically was on the roster all year.
Well,
yes, that was our insurance plan. That was our insurance plan.
Yeah, and it just felt like too much of a gamble. And so I really was over stressing my concern there of him being a liability. So even anything other than being a liability would have put him in the running for being most improved. And he was good, right? Like again, we faced a litany of great defense. Every week we were doing a matchup show. It was Max Crosby or whoever. Like we're just playing these great defensive ends and interior defensive linemen that can push out and stuff. And he handled it pretty well. It was a big gauntlet and he did a good job. I'm not going there. So I had 3 guys in consideration. Dotson was one. He's kind of my bronze. I knew you were probably going to pick Spencer Brown, so I was giving him silver. And I want to make sure that somewhere in this wrap-up show, Khalil Shakir gets some shine. And so for me, most improved is Khalil Shakir because he was not by me, probably not by the Bills. Brandon Beane even said as much. He wasn't a bubble roster player by the Bills, but he got a lot of flack this summer with the additions of wide receiver and what the Bills brought in of saying like, oh, well, he's not even going to be able to make this roster. Where's he fit in? And last year I was high on him and we saw some really good things in camp, but then when it came the season, he was running around a little scattered.
He lost me. He lost me. The run blocking, the bad route spacing and things like that. I was like, no, I don't see it. And I let myself move on. And it didn't feel like
it took instantly. And then this year, I mean, we want to talk about efficient players and like efficiency. He's not gonna. He probably. I didn't look into it here beforehand. He probably didn't meet a lot of the thresholds in terms of targets and stuff to get in with a lot of the top players in terms of efficiency. But he's right there, and his catch percentage is high. What he was able to do in terms of this offense lacked explosive plays, even with the wide receivers, and he was what generated explosive plays every time, whether it was deep balls and getting open deep or yards after catch, which is something we've been looking for years. I even just had this conversation with Nate Geary offline talking about, he wanting to bump Shakir out. And my thing is, this is like Beasley on steroids. He can do all the safety blanket. He's found ways to get comfortable in zone and provide that safety blanket for Allen, but then he provides yards after catch. He can go deep on guys. He can moss a dude. Like, he's got all these other types of abilities, and he's turned into a really good run blocker. So all that type of improvement, he forced his way onto the field. And now I think he's solidified this slot spot where you don't really have to worry about it here going into this year. And so for that reason, I'm giving him my most improved player here.
I think it's a great call, and I think he's really built himself into basically that, like, the Emmanuel Sanders type, where he can play multiple different positions in a great offense. He's probably your like 3-4 guy, but he can be a number 2. He can play that number 2 role, and that as long as he's one of your top weapons out there, you're going to benefit from it. And that if you have, he probably could use this offense, we know, can use a take the top off deep guy. We don't really have that. We lost that with Gabe Davis, and we know the inconsistencies people would be frustrated with there. But being able to play in all those other spaces where he can be a threat deep, he can take a bubble screen for 35 yards. We saw that. He can break a tackle like he did that crazy play against Pittsburgh. All the different highlights that he showed. And you brought up one of the most important ones for me. The swing he took as a run blocker from maybe the single most detrimental piece of the run game as a rookie to legitimately being a net positive is only possible through just sheer hard work. Like, hard work and willingness. You do not build that any other way. It's simply, are you willing to stick your nose in there with guys who are outright bigger than you and try to move them around? And he isn't awesome, but became a willing and active block. And like, I don't expect anybody who's 6'1", 190 to be like an awesome run blocker, but he is active. He moves his feet. He sticks his nose in there, and he gets in the way. And against DBs, like, when you have James Cook, that's all you need. Like, I don't need you to mow guys down and pancake everybody. He moves his feet. He sticks his nose in there, and he's not afraid to do it. And now, importantly, he knows where to be.
Yeah, and that was, so a lot of people, including myself, patted me on the back for being showing that he was trending this year and like really pointing it out and saying like, this guy's going to steal snaps. And what it was early in the season was that run blocking. It showed up right away, and it was like, this is different. And if he keeps up that willingness, because we had heard Sean McDermott even talk about it early in the season, that physicality and people being willing, and that seemed like maybe a knock on a Hardy, and showing Shakir really going out and doing it. And then you saw the snaps go in favor of Shakir. And you talked about Emmanuel Sanders. I remember Emmanuel Sanders talking about one of his favorite things was springing big runs. And it wasn't that he was like laying guys out with blocks. It's just getting in the way and being willing to get in that lane. And once you're at the second level, you just have to create space. And so that, I love that comparison to Emmanuel Sanders, because he was big on that type of stuff too. And you see Shakir taking pride in it and being willing to now. So kudos to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a good guy to give that nod to. And I think all those guys well deserved to be that. Your top 3, I think, is a really,
and in this vein, we give this coaching staff such a hard time on Twitter, you guys, but like, we're talking about multiple players here in consideration. That is also part of the coaching staff and developing players, right?
Yes, absolutely. A couple of last ones here. Rookie of the year was maybe a little tougher.
I'm interested. I want you to go first here.
So obviously your first thought, but there's only 2 guys who got enough playing time to really matter. They're both on offense. At one point we considered doing like defensive rookie of the year and offensive rookie of the year, but like Dorian Williams is the only defensive guy who got any snaps on defense. Or like, wasn't he really anybody who even got enough playing time to count? So it's a decision between I'll say exciting for the future, but still kind of inconsistent offensive production of Dalton Kincaid versus the only player on the Buffalo Bills who played every single snap all season, O'Cyrus Torrence. I I do think I'm gonna pick O'Cyrus Torrence. I think what he did to solidify that offensive line, and I think it would be naive of us to think that Spencer Brown's best season, a part of it wasn't having a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence next to him that he can really depend on. And again, O'Cyrus Torrence wasn't perfect, neither was Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
I don't think that was part of the equation there, but he was good. He was consistently good all the time. Did not give up a lot of pressures, played every single snap all season long, was out there, and I think deserves recognition. I do think I'm very excited about Dalton Kincaid. I'm still probably think Dalton Kincaid has a higher ceiling.
Yes.
I don't know that I see O'Cyrus Torrence as a future all-pro or anything, but I see him as a good starter. I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's going to be very similar to Spencer Brown, a powerful road grading run blocker and a good enough pass blocker. And I think that's what those guys both are: road grading, powerful run blockers, and good enough pass blockers. And that combination is better than what we've had in a long time. So I'll give my nod to O'Cyrus Torrence.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, I didn't even think twice. It wasn't a debate for me really at all. It was O'Cyrus Torrence.
Yeah.
Both based on like one was a first round pick, one's a second round pick, right? So the expectations were a little bit different coming in too. I expected him to compete for that job. I didn't expect him to take the starting job right away, and I didn't expect him to hold it down the entire season.
Every single snap.
Yeah, we know rookie walls happen. We know problems happen, and there's a couple comments about it. This was a guy we never got on here and talked about in a post game show. We never got on here like, like with Saffold. It was every week. We're like, oh my God, Saffold just getting beat up. With John Feliciano, it was like he was the biggest problem in this game. He was the biggest problem in the Chiefs game. You never had that this year, and I know he was up and down, and he had some.
There was one, like I'm thinking back. There was like one where I remember they isolated him, and it was like I don't know if it was Chris Jones or it was one of the
he got worked a couple times.
There was a couple, because unfortunately we had a run where he played it was Jeffrey Simmons and Chris Jones and Quinn and Williams, like all those guys, and Christian Wilkins, all boom, 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 all right in a row. So he wasn't perfect, but the fact that he went up against all of those guys,
the Eagles
all
too,
season long. The crazy Jalen Carter and their combination, Jordan Davis, he still only gave up 3 sacks all season long. Like he was not pushed around or abused. The total number of pressures was in good range. Like it was, not perfect, but very, very good and very encouraging.
And the fact that this position, interior offensive line, to your point, it made Spencer Brown better. You saw on the other side, Deion Dawkins getting it. This is a position that I was really frustrated with Brandon Beane's ability to solidify it, and now I feel like with the addition of O'Cyrus Torrence, you've solidified that position. This isn't something we have to worry about year in and year out of getting interior offensive linemen. You've got that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to give a little bit of love here to Dalton Kincaid. We shouldn't minimize the fact that he did break the rookie receptions record. He broke the tight end catch record. So already the most he had more receptions than Sammy Watkins did.
That was the big one. The tight end stuff, like we don't have a great history. With
our bar is so low.
And
I still feel very, very good that he's going to be the greatest tight end in Bills history before his rookie contract's done. Like his 4 or 5 seasons of tight end catching production will be the most of anybody ever. And already starting out in what many people felt was kind of like disappointing. The guy had 73 catches for 673 yards. He had like the
Laporta also skewed a lot of this.
Correct. So unfortunately, Sam Laporta probably had the second best rookie tight end season ever, which made Dalton Kincaid having like the 5th best rookie tight end season ever kind of look disappointing. It was still like, it's like Jeremy Shockey, Mike Ditka, the old school Philadelphia Keith Jackson, and then Dalton Kincaid. Like, yes, now Sam Laporta got jumped up there too, and Detroit did use him more than we used Dalton Kincaid. And kudos to them. Like, Sam Laporta looks awesome. He looks more. I joke, like, if you're talking about the old school Patriots, like, he looks more Gronk. Kincaid looks more Hernandez. Like, that's the style of players they are. We knew that coming out. Like, that's just the kind of guy that we got. I still feel very, very good about having Dalton Kincaid. I'm excited about him in the future. He did not disappoint in any manner, but the fact that O'Cyrus Torrence exceeded our expectations by more than what Kincaid did, I think is the reason.
Return on investment was my thinking.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, no, that's great thought process and good comparison. All right. Anybody else we want to give some shine here? I know we threw out some other things.
We talked. I had positional coach, positional unit, and then most disappointing were still on my list. I don't know if you want to go through all three of those.
Yeah, let's do those. I think position coach is a two-way battle. I think one on offense, one on defense. Bobby Babich just got promoted. The fact that he got the things out of Terrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard without Matt Milano, I think deserves a ton of credit. Yeah. Aaron Cromer, what he did putting those guys together, deserves so much kudos. And everything we just said about O'Cyrus Torrence, the fact that we had all those guys together and gelling the way they did, Spencer Brown's best season, Deion Dawkins' best season, you have to give Aaron Cromer a lot of that credit. Did you go a different direction, or was it one of those two?
I went with Aaron Cromer.
Okay.
For me, it was, when you look at the stats of this offense, if you head over to FTN Fantasy and look up some of the DVOA stuff, they were like top 5 in every category, in adjusted line yards and adjusted sack percentage. And
a lot of James Cook production was yards before contact. He was like consistently his chunk runs were because no one touched him until he was 10 yards down the field.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say it when we were talking about James Cook's offense. I didn't want to take away any of that shine, knowing that
he still did the production. Cromer. He still did it.
Yes. And we talked about Spencer Brown being the most improved player. We both had Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse as our other MVPs. So for me, it was a recurring theme here as we were running through the year, was like Aaron Cromer was really in his bag, and he's the run game guy. And so him in conjunction with Brady, I'm excited for that going forward, because that run game really took off when Brady took over, and they, I think, are working together in a really good way. And you saw that. I mean, Tony Romo, time and time again, and I know people hate Tony Romo, but he was blown away with what the Bills were doing to the interior of that Kansas City defense in that game. Even though they didn't win the game, they were pushing them off the line of scrimmage 3-4 yards every single time. And that's hard to do. And that a lot of that is coaching.
Some of the plays, the right side of the line was literally like opening the gate in a fence.
Right.
And like it literally just moved like this. And there was just now a huge gap of like, those two just moved their guys out of the way. Yep. It was awesome to see. So I think they very, very well deserved. I went the same way. Sure. I had Babich as my runner-up, but I just because of the overall of what the group did, and the same thing, that's my positional unit. I have to give it to the offensive line, what they did, being able to put that together. I will say I think the secondary deserves some credit in what they put together, and probably honestly maybe John Butler deserved more discussion for positional coach of the year, with how many moving parts there were, and that sometimes it was Cam Lewis, and sometimes it was Taylor Rapp, and sometimes it was DeMar Hamlin, and it was Dane Jackson, it was Kyer Elam, and it was Rasul Douglas during the season. And, basically the only defensive guys who consistently played all the time in the secondary were Poyer. We lost Hyde for a couple games, but Poyer and Taryn were about it.
Taryn came back from 2 concussions and still played both games.
Games.
Crazy.
I pray for his future health, but Christian Benford missed games. Just so many different moving parts and pieces. I do think it's the offensive line, but I think the secondary deserves some kudos for how many different guys played together.
Do we take it for granted that this team is so good at that? Right, like year in and year out, like
dude, John Butler and Sean McDermott, you can give them anything, and
it's
it
crazy,
just seems like
right?
It's going to turn into a a functional defensive
no matter how like chaotic it gets back there and moving parts and bringing guys in, it just seems to always
apparently the limit is when it's AJ Klein. Like apparently, like when it's AJ Klein and Cam Lewis, and like those are the people, like that combination. Apparently there is a bridge too far at some point, but it took quite a bit.
That is the bridge, but yes, in a hurt Rasul Douglas.
Yes, a hobbled Rasul Douglas, a taped together Jordan Poyer.
Right.
Apparently eventually there is a limit, but it takes a long time to get to it.
And most disappointing is pretty easy, right? Special teams.
So I think obviously you were very, very good about managing expectations with Von Miller. I think some people expected more from that. So I think depending on where your bar was, that he could be a mention for that as an individual. I think from an overall group, I'm flabbergasted that Matt Smiley still has a job. Like I there was so many different pieces. I know Sam Martin kind of had a moment towards the end of the season, but then also
he had a little stretch.
Hamstring. But he had a nice stretch in the final 6 weeks of the regular season. Tyler Bass had his worst season overall. Our coverage units by far had the worst year overall. We had one moment of a big return, that punt return that honestly Deontay Hardy should have never even returned the ball. So the fact that you had a guy who thought it was okay to catch the ball at the 4-yard line, yes, it's awesome. He took it 96 yards, but the fact that you have a coordinator who let a guy catch it at the 4-yard line, Jeffrey here saying Gabe is somebody in the range. So if you're talking about as a larger group, I think special teams is there. A lot of other players, depending on where you set the bar, Deontay Hardy, Tyler Bass. I think there were some guys that we had different expectations for, depending on how fast did you think Von Miller was going to come back?
Sure.
How big of a free agent year did you think Gabe Davis was going to have? Right. How confident were you in Tyler Bass coming off the previous year? Depending on where you set those bars, I think different people could have different answers there. But I think the special teams unit as a whole and that production is a good choice.
And the reason it was such a slam dunk for me is it literally cost games.
Yes.
Right. The 12 men on the field cost games. Tyler Bass missing field goals cost games.
The punt return, the game-winning punt return against
game-winning punt
return. We literally had a walk-off punt return.
Yeah, like that's not acceptable. And so them costing like Gabe Davis, disappointing, but you can chalk that up to he even when he wasn't being targeted, that one game where he got a game ball with no targets and like blocking, like he was still doing his job. It's hard as a wide receiver if you're not. Like Dorsey wasn't scheming anybody open, right? Like, so nobody was getting necessarily schemed into position. Yeah, he still had some drops. Yeah, maybe Dawson Knox is another one people like to rag on as somebody that is a disappointing player. To your point, Vaughn. But those guys, while disappointing, it never felt to me like they were the reason games were lost.
Yeah. So earlier, when we saw that the
Buccaneers guy,
the Tampa Bay Buccaneers special teams coordinator retired, I posted the meme of Jesus, I see what we've done for other people and I want that for me. It's
nice though that Miami's also in the same position. They just want to get rid of Danny Crossman and he's not going to. He's
a cockroach. He's a twitching cockroach. You can't kill him.
Yeah.
All right, man. So tonight I think was nice. We gave a lot of kudos and a lot of flowers out to a lot of different people who, still I think it's healthy to be able to step back and acknowledge people who had a good season, even when it had a disappointing ending. Not everything was perfect. Not everything went the way that we wanted. But ultimately it was still a very, very good season. A lot of people had good points, and that, we did have pretty terrible injury luck and have some really talented guys coming back next year who are going to be fully healthy. And I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, it was probably the most difficult season doing this there through November.
Yeah.
Like, Greg, we had some, I don't know about you, but my DMs were just like, I'm so sorry you guys have to do these post-game shows and stuff, right? And because we talked
about that 6-6 stretch, like that when they were just giving away those games.
We talked to some guys from really good fan bases, and it is just hard when the expectations, Evan Lazar telling us about what it was like during that Brady dynasty. And when the expectations were so high, like it is so hard as a fan to go through that. But you're right. It is good to still take a step back. And the goals weren't met, but I still had a lot of fun. right? Like more times than not, my weekends were full of Buffalo Bills having fun beating football teams. And that is all that I can ask for.
Yeah. This is entertainment. This is, I know I let it emotionally affect me as much as anybody does, but it's still healthy to look at, it's still entertainment. We come here to be entertained. I had 20 weeks of entertaining football in my life. And we're going to have that again in the coming seasons. And yes, do I hope that one of those ends with 22 weeks of entertaining football? I do. That's absolutely what I want.
Even in the other weeks that were losses, the Bills were still so good that most of the games were still entertaining. It just seems like they lost that at the end, right? It's all one score losses.
In 2 seasons, we've lost by more than a score once. Like we've been beaten by more than a score one time in 2 years. The Bills are going to be either blow out the other team or be in it every single game. It's all you can ask for. We have the most fun player to root for in the NFL. It's going to be a good time. We're going to be here for you guys all off season long. Aaron and I take the same measured kind of pace. I know some people are already diving into draft work. We want to take our time. We got those guys. Pay attention to all the guys down the Senior Bowl. John Helmkamp and Daniel Harms came over. They're doing a full draft channel. Make sure you're checking that out. A lot of the guys over Air Raid Hour do a great job with some of that. Anthony Prohaska over Disguised Coverage does a great job with this draft work. We'll get into that, but when it comes time. So we're going to do some roster evaluation pieces coming up here, looking at what is for anybody who didn't have a chance, I did do a salary cap update last week just to kind of give
people, show, by the way,
just a look at where things stand. We're still going to do our salary cap extravaganza with everybody across the channel who has different ideas and wants to pitch things. I actually think that'll help kind of give us a baseline so we don't have to do quite as much education stuff in that show. We can just talk about the crazy fun things.
So people know I did not pass the prerequisite math test to be invited on to the salary cap extravaganza. That's why I won't be there.
Standardized testing is a challenging thing. A lot of people feel strongly about it. It is what it is. We're gonna be able to go through some of that, but we're gonna take our steps in the right way to build up through the actual timeline of this off season. So we're gonna look through now, evaluating the roster. Hey, where are our biggest gaps? Who are the biggest pending free agents? Who do we want to see re-signed? Then we'll go into some of our wish list pieces on offensive free agency wish list, defensive free agency wish list. Then we'll react to the first couple of weeks of free agency. Then we'll switch gears over into, okay, where does that leave us now? We've seen some of the re-signings. We've seen some of the extensions. We've seen some of the new free agency additions. Where does that now leave us going into the draft? And then we'll start into our biggest draft crushes. We'll get into mock drafts. We'll do all those different things. We're going to be here for you for all those different things, but we're going to take our time as we go through this offseason and be there for you every step of the way.
And Greg, I want to remind people though, also now is a great time to get a OnePass membership. We're going to have some guys tell you about why, but you will get it for the full year. You talked about all the content that we're going to be doing, all the content. This will get you all the way through till next season to this time of year. So now is probably the best time to line up your OnePass membership. And these guys are going to fill you in a little bit about what you get with that. Oh, I clicked the wrong one.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One OnePass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
the exasperated sent me over the edge. So check that out, guys. It's a ton of fun. We've actually had a lot of really cool people that we interact with on Twitter that recently decided to join and have really enjoyed the Slack channel. It's really, really great. It's kind of your own manicured little thing. I will say, when we get into times for free agency and during the draft are some of the most valuable times to be in there, because like if you don't want to have to scour Twitter all the time. Every single big signing is shared there with all kinds of Bills fans reaction. We're in there. We're going to be doing some fun upcoming things with maybe some dedicated times for Q&A where you guys can ask each of the people on the staff questions and talk about different things. We're going to be there for you. As Chris just put up here on the bottom, press that like button, help us out, be able to share this all kinds of different places. But on behalf of our man, Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.